Hello again, and welcome to the PsychoPy guide. In this guide, we'll look at what PsychoPy actually is and some of its features, and then at the end, we'll look at how to set up our experimental settings ready for our first experiment. So, PsychoPy is a experimental building tool which allows us to build experiments either using a graphical user interface like this one or via code. When you open PsychoPy, it has three main windows. We have this window, which is the builder window, and then we have the coder window, and lastly, the runner window. So the builder window allows you to build your experiment using the graphical user interface, and within this window, we also have three extra windows, which is the routines window, the components window, and the flow window. So in the routines window, this is where we will see our different components being added in and their ordering, as well as their times. Then over here on the components, we can see the different components that we can add into our routines. So that could be like images, text, sounds. And within this as well, we also have some drop-down menus that allow us to get to different components. So our stimuli, gratings, movies, different shapes, and then our responses. So this is how our participants will respond to our experiment via a joystick, keyboard, mouse, sliders, and then custom. This allows us to add in custom codes and other custom components. And lastly, we have our I/O. So this allows us to add in external hardware, and this component here would allow PsychoPy to interact with that external hardware. So in the top here we have the favorites, and we can add or take away to the favorites as we see fit. If we right click on the slider component, and then we can remove from favorites. And we can do the same with adding to favorites. So I could add the movies by right clicking and then add to favorites. As you can see, it gets added to the favorites. So just a quick way to get to the components that you'll be using for your experiment. Next, we have the coder window. So in this window, when you finish making your experiment, it will compile a PsychoPy script for you, and you'll be able to view and edit that script here in this window. I do recommend though that you don't edit any of the script unless you know exactly what you're doing beforehand. And lastly, we have the runner window. So in this window, your experiment will pop up here in this little box here, and you'll be able to click on it and then run it, save it, and other different things you can do. There's also this alerts box here and this standard out here, which will explain to you any errors that you may have received and what line of code the error was in. And lastly, we will go into the how to set up the experiment ready for your first experiment. So the very first thing we want to do is to click on File and then Save As. And then here we will want to save our experiment in a place that we can get to and won't get removed. So that would be your X drive. And make a folder, which I've already done, and give your experiment a name. So for this, we just call it demo, and then save as. And as you can see now, we have the experiment saved as demo with the PsychoPy file extension. Next, we want to click onto the edit experimental settings cog icon here, and this will bring up a dialog box showing our experimental name, which is picked up from our saved experiment name, demo, but we could change that to whatever we want. It will not change the file save name, it will just be what we decide to call the experiment. So we keep it as demo for now. Next, we can see the show info dialog, and this is a checkbox. If we leave that on, then the experiment info here will be displayed at the very start of the experiment. So when we click run the experiment, this dialog box will pop up with these two fields here and these default settings set up here. We can add or take away from the experimental info that we start with. So let's add in another one, and let's call that gender. And in here, instead of just leaving it blank for the researcher or the participant to enter, what we will do is make a list so that we can just choose from a drop-down menu which gender we're going to be using for this participant. So to create a list, we need to use square brackets, and then we need to type in what our list components will be. The next things that we see are enable escape keys. If we have this turned off, then we will not be able to use the escape key on the keyboard to exit the experiment. So I think this is quite important to leave on, that it gives us a way to get out of the experiment without having to do a hard reset, Control Alt Delete, for example. For stereo, this just means that we play either stereo, 2 channels, or if we unclick it, we have 1 channel. And then PsychoPy version. So this is a drop-down menu that has all of the PsychoPy versions previous to this one, and you can choose any which one you want to run your experiment in. If we leave it blank, it will run the latest, the one that you actually have installed. The other things that we shall touch upon within this is just the screen. We can leave the monitor as the test monitor at screen 1, but the thing we want to look at here is full screen or not. So this checkbox here, when we have it checked, it will run in full screen mode, and if we uncheck it, it will then open up the window size in pixels. So this is an X and Y coordinates of your screen and a pixel size. So if we just leave that on, it will give us the full screen. Color here is actually the color of our background, and 3 zeros actually means gray. But we can change it to black or white by just making these, as you can read there, it says black 111, and that will change it to black. And if we go -1 1 that will be white. And then we got the color space. This is the color space that we are using. This is just red, green, blue, but you can choose any other color space that you want. And lastly, we have units. So units, again, drop down menu that we can use different units. Centimeters, for example, will allow us to use, let's say, an image. We set up an image, and then we set the size of the image to be in centimeters. So 5 centimeters by 5 centimeters on a flat screen. So for now, we'll just leave it as height. So we'll just hit OK for now. And that is the end of the PsychoPy guide. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.